Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tama Shloke Bhaktir Bhagavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss this most glorious Srimad Bhagavatam, the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. So this Srimad Bhagavatam is a very, very wonderful part of our spiritual process, as we'll talk about a little bit later today. So I'm very fortunate. Beg the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas so that we may have a nice discussion today. So today we're reading from 4th Canto, chapter 14, text number 44, 45, and 46. So we'll finish today chapter 14. And the title of the chapter is The Story of King Vena. So I'll read the translations for the first two verses, and then we'll read the Sanskrit and translation for verse 46. So verse 44, the translation is, this person born from King Vena's thighs was named Bahuka, and his complexion was as black as a crow's. All the limbs of his body were very short. His arms and legs were short, and his jaws were large. His nose was flat, his eyes were reddish, and his hair copper-colored. Verse 45. He was very submissive and meek, and immediately after his birth, he bowed down and inquired, Sirs, what shall I do? The great sages replied, Please sit down, Nishida. Thus, Nishada, the father of the Nishada race, was born. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. It is said in the Shastras that the head of the body represents the Brahmanas, the arms represent the Kshatriyas, the abdomen represents the Vaishyas, and the legs, beginning with the thighs, represent the Shudras. The Shudras are sometimes called black or Krishna. The Brahmanas are called Shukla or white, and the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas are a mixture of black and white. However, those who are extraordinarily white are said to have skin produced out of white leprosy. It may be concluded that white or golden hue is the color of the higher caste, and black is the complexion of the Shudras. Now, verse 46, we'll do the Sanskrit and the translation, the word for word and translation and purport. So, verse 46, Tasya vamshastu naishada giri kanana gocharaha yena harajaya mano vena kalmasam ulbanam. Tasya, his Nishadas. Vamsha, descendants. Two, then. Naishada, called Naishadas. Girikanana, the hills and forests. Gochara, inhabiting. Yena, because. Aharat, he took upon himself. Jayamana, being born. Vena, of King Vena. Kalmasam, of all kinds of sins. Ulbanam, very fearful. Translation and purport again by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada. After his Nishada's birth, he immediately took charge of all the resultant actions of King Vena's sinful activities. As such, this Nishada class are always engaged in sinful activities like stealing, plundering, and hunting. Consequently, they are only allowed to live in the hills and forests. Purport. The Naishadas are not allowed to live in cities and towns because they are sinful by nature. As such, their body are very ugly, and their occupations are also sinful. We should, however, know that even these sinful men, who are sometimes called kiratas, can be delivered from their sinful condition to the topmost Vaishnava platform by the mercy of a pure devotee. Engagement in transcendental loving devotional service of the Lord can make anyone, however sinful he may be, fit to return home back to Godhead. One has to become free from all contamination by the process of devotional service. In this way, everyone can become fit to return back to Godhead. This is confirmed by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita 9:32. Mami parta vyaprashitya yeyapisya papas yonaha striyo vaishyas tata shudras teyapi yanti param gatim. O son of Pratap, those who take shelter of me, though they may be of lower birth, women, Vaishyas, merchants, as well as Shudras, workers, can approach the supreme destination. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 14th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Story of King Vena. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakadvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Bhakta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanuste Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasudi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. So once again, beg the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas so that we can have a nice discussion, repeating what has been spoken by our acharyas on these topics of the story of King Vena. So just a little bit of background and review for where we are as we're concluding this chapter. We know that King Vena, born in the lineage of Dhruva Maharaj, has deviated from that lineage, born of the great King Anga, but his mother, Sunita, having not the same qualification. And so King Vena, born with very, we can say, not so kind qualities, performing many, many heinous activities, killing children and creating so much havoc. And as he rose to the position of king, it became a precarious situation. And we see here the actions by the sages are very indicative of how society is to be ruled. That the ultimate head of society must be the Brahmanas, the sages. The Kshatriyas who are ruling as kings are doing so under guidance, under the influence of the wise sages. And the sages tried to correct King Vena. They were not eager to kill him, as they will in shortly, but they were trying to preach to him, trying to correct his action. But King Vena, being advised by the sages, that advice somehow did not register. We see in verses 23 through 28, King Vena's delusional mentality his view was exact opposite of what the sages were saying. They were 180 degrees out there, diametrically opposed. It reminds me of the verse in Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter. What is night for the materialist is day for the introspective sage, and vice versa. What the Brahmanas were suggesting, King Vena had understood to be exact opposite. And that's what we see mostly throughout society, where spiritual life is considered to be, sort of this path not to be followed, or maybe a path of weakness or whatnot. And as we'll see, and as we see throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, it is in fact the only path for success in life. So King Vena had this similar mood, and the sages, they were left with no choice. And so they had to kill King Vena. And this, comes at an interesting dynamic with what we understand to be the Brahminical qualities of being very peaceful. And we can see that the sages performed this action in the right mood. They were saddened by the fact that King Vena had not taken to their advice. They had tried to correct first. And their motive for killing King Vena was due to the suffering of humanity. The consequences of King Vena's rule was intolerable for the Brahmanas. They were saddened by the situation. And their anger arose not when they were not being listened to, but when King Vena insulted Lord Vishnu. That is when their emotion rose to anger. And we see in Nectar of Instruction these 6 urges: Vacho Vega, Manasa, Krodha Vega. This Krodha, this anger, it has a positive application when anger can be used. And it's explained that anger can be used in the protection of Krishna and his devotees. And so the great sages, being very learned, rose to the point of anger, but again, in the right consciousness. And we see great intelligence being deployed here. This is critical in the actions of the sages. They were very thoughtful in planning out, because as we see, they had great power. They could, with simple mantras, destroy somebody. King Vena was also very powerful, and we see what he did with that power. He enacted a reign of terror. So this great ability and power, it must be used with intelligence. Then it is beneficial. And we see that with the sages. And in these verses, how they're able to make a good situation out of a very bad circumstance. That takes great power, but also intelligence. We'll talk a little bit more about having one or the other and its implications. So in verse 41, we see this, this duty of the Brahmana, and how the Brahmanas must perform their duty. They are peaceful and impartial to everyone. And the verse gives the example of, if one neglects it, it's like a pot keeping water with a crack in it. That pot loses its ability or its contents of water. Similarly, the Brahmanas must perform their duty. Otherwise, their spiritual powers are diminished. Near the end of Bhagavad Gita, in the 18th chapter, Krishna gives the qualities, the natural qualities of the Brahmanas, and they are peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. So we see these qualities in the first couple listed are peacefulness, self-control, and austerity. And the Brahmanas did this. The great sages did this. But in the purport, Srila Prabhupada speaks very nicely about the types of Brahmanas and the Brahmana Pandita versus the Brahmana Vaishnava. So these qualities of the Brahmana, they have value when they are connected to Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada is establishing that the Vaishnava is superior or beyond the realm of the Brahman because they have understood Krishna. For example, I may be, have this quality of ahimsa, peace. But if I am peaceful in ahimsa to everyone, but I haven't brought it to the process of devotional service, connected that peaceful quality with Krishna, then I haven't really accomplished much. So Srila Prabhupada is giving us some guidance here about the Brahmanas. And, so our knowledge, it has value and is connected to Krishna. And we see, many examples in our scriptures, the pastime of Narada Muni going to see Lord Vishnu. And when he passed the Brahmana, he had asked, Narada Muni to inquire when he might be liberated. And he then continued on, and he passed a cobbler who, asked when he might see the Lord. And as we all know, when Narada Muni presented that question to Lord Vishnu and then came back and relayed to the Brahmana, what Lord Vishnu was doing, and the Brahmana heard that Krishna or Vishnu was threading the eye of a needle with an elephant. The Brahmana said, impossible. And then Narada Muni understood why Vishnu said the Brahmana will not achieve liberation for thousands of years. And when he took that same story to the cobbler, who said that, again, Vishnu was threading the eye of a needle with an elephant, the cobbler began to dance in ecstasy, knowing that Narada Muni had seen the Lord and understanding the great ability of the Lord. And Narada Muni was surprised and said, "You believe that Vishnu can put an elephant through the eye of a needle?" And the cobbler explained, "Of course. Look at everything around us. I'm sitting under this banyan tree, and from one tiny seed, he has pushed out this giant tree." And so the instruction is that the knowledge itself is not valuable until it's connected to Krishna and brings about a change of consciousness. We see in Krishna Lila the story of the Brahmanas. When the cowherd boys were hungry, they approached the Brahmanas who were worshiping Krishna via yajna. They were offering grains into the fire, yet they had an opportunity to offer those grains directly to Krishna. And they refused. But the wives of the Brahmanas, they understood. So much so, they were even willing to relinquish their husbands to perform that devotional service of feeding Krishna and Balaram. So the knowledge that we have, it has to come connected to Krishna. And that is a very important point that Srila Prabhupada is making here in the 42nd purport. And there's a nice implication for all of us. As we study these pastimes and study Srimad Bhagavatam and so many things, we sometimes tend to focus on, how many stories in Srimad Bhagavatam I know. How many, how well or how much detail do I remember and know the Ramayana or Mahabharata, or how many bhajans I can sing. But our focus should be not on how much we know, but how much has that knowledge transformed our heart. We see Kamsa had knowledge. Hiranyakashipu had so much knowledge. He preached perfect philosophy when his brother Hiranyaksha was killed. Yet, did that have a change in consciousness? So the knowledge we have is helpful, but it must come and lead to a change in consciousness. So we can seek to acquire this knowledge. We've just studied the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj, and we're transitioning to study the pastimes of King Prithu. And our meditation should be on how much these pastimes, how much the activities of Dhruva Maharaj, not that I can recall or I know, but how much they have changed my own consciousness and how I approach my day-to-day pursuit of perfection of life via the process of devotional service. So it's a nice opportunity by reading this purport for us to meditate on that aspect of knowledge. Because just having knowledge, as we see over and over again, isn't necessarily going to result in success. It is really the application of that. So let our meditation move to the point of how much I'm taking these pastimes and implementing the teachings of them into my life. Of course, knowing them in the first place is beneficial, so I'm not suggesting that we should not study, but take it a step further. So we can realize the full potential of these beautiful stories, like the story of King Vena in the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the 42nd verse, we see this process of hereditary succession. The families following the Vedic processes can carry out great spiritual traditions generation to generation. But it requires the performance of these purificatory processes. It is not a guaranteed system. And Srila Prabhupada talks about that beginning even before the conception of the child as Garbhadana Samskara, how it must be performed in order to ensure that the nice gene pool, if you will, can carry on the benefit and carry on this great family tradition of spirituality. But we know that the lineage is not a guarantee, and this pastime of King Vena is a great example for us. King Yanga was carrying on, this wonderful hereditary lineage from Dhruva Maharaj. But when it mixed with Mother Sunita, it led to the loss of that opportunity with King Vena. So being born in a great family can be helpful, but it's not a guarantee. We must continue the process of spiritual life in order for it to continue. And we can see the opposite is also true. Being born in a not so great family can also result in great things. And we just studied one such pastime with the appearance of Lord Nrsimhadev. Prahlad Maharaj was born in the family of the king of demons, yet was able to perform pure devotional service throughout his life. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the discussion on the final verse of this chapter. So in 43, we enter another kind of interesting discussion here, where today's in modern world, we see science spending so much time on cloning and genetic engineering. And we see from this pastime the power of our Vedic Shastra. The goal of modern science is cloning and genetic engineering. Billions and billions of dollars are being spent, trying to create some desired life form. Cloning, they're trying to make a copy of something. The genetic engineering, they're trying to modify some aspect to create some more beneficial characteristics. We see this in our food supply. These genetically modified foods are destroying the nutrients of our food for the purpose of enhancing the business of making food, to make foods more repellent or tolerant to insects and other things. Science is modifying these foodstuffs, and they're claiming great victory, not understanding that the severe side effects are ruining our health. So, science has one ability to do this. But we see the sages, how expert they were in being able to create something great out of, not a great situation. Nothing can trump our Vedic processes. This is still the best and most modern and latest technology. And the sages are performing this, what modern science is still trying to do today and not able to do. Within Srimad Bhagavatam, We see it being done thousands and thousands of years ago. But the right process must be followed. The process empowered by the Supreme Lord. It can happen. And what were the sages able to do? They were able to create a personality, a form, out of the body of King Vena. And this form is, being described in verse 44 as being very dark and darkish and not so very attractive, because it contained all the sin, the reactions, the prarabdha karma of King Vena. But what the sages were able to do was to extract the bad out of the body of King Vena into the form of Bhahuka, for the purpose of then being able to, as we'll see in the next chapter, bring out and return the great genetic lineage that was coming from Dhruva Maharaj to create King Prithu and his consort. So you can see how sophisticated, how talented the sages were, that they were able to, pull out the bad, isolate it, and then ultimately create one of the great kings that we'll discuss in the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. We'll see so many wonderful chapters dedicated to Prithu Maharaj as the great ruler and establisher of civilization, particularly agricultural civilization. So this was the great power of these knowledgeable sages. Now we'll discuss, that was a little bit of a long introduction to today's verses, but just wanted to touch, as I was asked to speak a little bit about the prior verses. So following that instruction, I did. And so now we'll discuss these verses 44, 45, and 46. So in 44, we see that born from King Vena's thighs was Bhahuka, and the complexion was very blackish. The limbs were short, the arms were short, square-nosed, coppery-fired hair, coppery-colored hair. Thankfully, we don't see so many of these types of persons running around. But we understand that the signs of our body, they're indicative of one's past. Our form today is indicative of our past karma. And Bhahuka was taking this form, having been the result of all of King Vena's sins. I remember reading one commentary from Srila Prabhupada, and he said, America is the land of good karma, because everyone was very beautiful. And so that was the manifest reaction, this prarabdha karma of their past activities. But he was saddened because now they are using that good position to perform so much bad karma. And so their future will be like this of Bhahuka. And so our appearance is indicative. It is not a guarantee, but it is indicative of our past. And it cuts the other way. When Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur appeared, the astrologer was commenting on the very divine qualities manifest in the form of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's form. And of course, his activities immediately from birth, carried forward those very divine signs. So the activities must also match the initial starting point, if you will. And as we'll see in the last verse, one may have a very ugly, or we can say, not so attractive form based on past karma, but that is completely irrelevant to one's potential to become a pure Vaishnava and elevate from such circumstance. So we'll discuss more of that in the discussion on the 46th verse. In the 45th verse, Srila Prabhupada comments about the role of the Brahmana, the Kshatriya, the Vaishya, and the Shudra, and he is speaking about what everyone's responsibility is, and the society works very well when all four varnas work together cooperatively. And it's always given, society is kind of constructed like a body. And while the Brahmanas represent the head, and the Kshatriyas represent the arms, and the Vaishyas the abdomen or torso, and the Shudras the legs, a functioning body needs all four parts to be successful. If you have a head, but your legs are not working, well, then your quality of life certainly is not going to be as great. So the Shudras have a very important role in creating a very wonderful existence for society. The Kshatriyas as the arms, well, if the Kshatriyas and the arms are not working with the Vaishyas feeding the body, well, then what is the result of one's existence? And in anyone's body, we know the head does not take advantage of the legs or the arms or vice versa. They work together very cooperatively. And this is the structure of society. Our varnashram dharma is established in a way of not one trying to oppress another, but utilizing one's skills, talents, and abilities to the fullest to live in a means that can create the best circumstance for propagating spiritual life. So this process must be followed, because if we have a very powerful body or arms that can do wonderful things, but if the head is not intelligent enough to know how to utilize that, then we see very destructive things. And that was a scenario of King Vena. He was very powerful, but his head, his intelligence was not rightfully situated, and thus we see very destructive consequences. So in society, in today's world, we have countries that have so many wonderful abilities and resources and technology, but if they're being applied with very Shudra-like mentality, then we see all the conflict and misuse of ability that we see all around us. Society led by Brahmanas, who are well-versed in Shastra and how to apply Shastra rightfully, as we see the sages here in King Vena's situation. The sages were very wonderfully able to bring about a good situation from a very bad situation. Ultimately, we're going to see a great rule for many, many years coming out of this situation. And that was performed by the Brahmanas, the sages. And so if it's applied properly, it can have very wonderful consequences. So at the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada speaks about, the color of our skin and indications of higher caste and lower caste. And, in some ways, if you read some of this purport in isolation, it can lead to some very dangerous or maybe controversial points. But Srila Prabhupada explains in the next verse the significance of, having discussed the significance of the color of our skin or the shape of our body, the form, it has some significance. It is a direct result of our past activities. But it also has some insignificance in that one can go beyond that limitation or that situation and perform great things. And so we'll spend now the rest of today's session on discussing on verse 46. One comment before we get into the core of the purport, which the verse says, they are only allowed to live in the hills and forests. And Prabhupada says the Naishadas are not allowed to live in the cities and towns. So you can see that the unruly, if you're not able to live by the rules, the kings would expel or send out to the forest these individuals who were not able to live in society, coexisting peacefully. And this was the order. And we see to some degree that in today's society as well. Those who are the thieves and rogues are put into jails or prisons and removed from general society. In the olden days, they were removed by sending them to the forest. But somewhat ironically, we know that the devotees, those really seeking spiritual life, they also go to the forest, where the distractions of material life are not present, and they can concentrate in spiritual life. We speak of vana prashta ashram. Vana refers to the forest, that after living a grihastha life in the city, or whatever our occupation may take us, one should renounce that and go into the forest. So the difference, is that we, the spiritualists, desire to go to the forest voluntarily, seeking a more simple life where one can focus on the higher purposes. Whereas the thieves and rogues are forced into the city, out into the forest, though they would love very much to come into the cities and disrupt the existence of others. So I just thought that was a little interesting or ironic in the utilization of the forests. So as we've heard and seen here, birth, it is an indicator of our past. But very importantly, it is not a guarantee for future success. As we see in the situation of even King Vena, he was born in the family of a good lineage, at least partially, but it was not a guarantee for success. But our birthright, it does establish a starting point. If you're born in a very spiritually oriented family, it can enhance the opportunity and the likelihood that one may carry forward. Just like if you're born in a family of lawyers, you're more likely to also become a lawyer than maybe someone else. But being born in a family of a lawyer doesn't guarantee you to be a lawyer. You still must qualify. You must perform the various activities that can qualify you to become a lawyer. So being born in a spiritual family doesn't guarantee success. You must still perform the activities. And the inverse is also true, which is very encouraging for all of us. That being born in a very, inauspicious family, I can say. Maybe our material situation suggests a very inauspicious past. It can be overcome. And that is the great potency of devotional service. And we get some clues into this, that the extraordinary power of bhakti, it's so great that it can uplift one from the most degraded of situations. Even those coming from this Naishada class are very quickly able to be uplifted to perfect Vaishnavas by the potency of devotional service. This is how powerful bhakti is. In chapter 9 of Bhagavad Gita, there are a series of 7 verses, and Prabhupada has quoted the last of those verses here in this purport that speak about the potency of devotional service. So I wanted to spend a few minutes discussing that. The very famous verse, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yome Bhakti Prayachati Tadaham Bhakti Upartam Ashnami Prayatatmanaha. That this very simple process of offering a leaf, a fruit, a flower, or even a glass of water, if it's offered with love and devotion, is considered pure bhakti. The highest devotional service is pure devotional service. And that can be done with a very simple process of offering a glass of water, a leaf, a fruit or flower. So Krishna is putting no material qualification on. You don't have to be able to recite so many Sanskrit shlokas. You don't have to have so much wealth to accumulate the bhoga to be able to make an offering. You don't have to have so much, energy even or skill to offer a fruit or a flower or even a glass of water. The only thing we need is bhakti, love. Krishna says he'll accept it. So he establishes the highest devotional service in the various, we can say, simplest of process. Not easy, but simple. And what's the result of this pure devotional service? Krishna says in 2 verses later in the section of Bhagavad Gita, that one attracts the favor of Krishna. One attracts the personal reciprocation and love of Krishna with this form of worship. Krishna says that the devotee is in me. And our acharyas explain that means that within Krishna's heart is all of his devotees. He loves us so much that we are within his heart. And if we think, how difficult it is to enter somebody's heart. If you take a very famous person, a very powerful person, some prime minister, president, or famous movie star, and from this position, how difficult it would be for us to enter into their consciousness, for them to think of us, for them to think favorably upon us. How much work and effort, we can say it may be impossible. We don't even have an ability to access them, yet alone know how to please them. Yet the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by the process of offering a leaf, a fruit, a flower, or water, is making space in his heart for such a devotee. This is the utmost love of Krishna, but the power of bhakti, the potency of devotional service, that the Supreme Lord himself becomes attracted to this devotion. So powerful it is. Think how much power he might have just to attract some mundane material person. But bhakti attracts the Supreme Personality of God. He continues in this section of Bhagavad Gita to say that even if you make a mistake in the process of bhakti, you can purify them from them. If that mistake was accidental and one is lamenting, sorrowful for that mistake, and remains fixed in bhakti. Bhakti is so powerful that if a mistake happens, the being fixed in devotional service, one can overcome that mistake. And then Krishna says, even further, and this is the verse Srila Prabhupada quoted, O son of Pritha, those who take shelter of me, though they may be of lower birth, women, Vaishyas, merchants, as well as Shudras, workers, can approach the supreme destination. So he's saying it doesn't matter how fallen you may be, by the power of bhakti, attracting the love and mercy of Krishna, coming through Guru Parampara, one may be uplifted from whatever situation we may be in. That is the sweetness and power of devotional service. So potent it is, it doesn't matter where we are coming from. Certainly, if we are coming from a spiritual family, we may be more apt or likely to come in contact with the process of devotional service. So, our opportunity, following in the mood of Srila Prabhupada, is to make that opportunity as widely available as possible, to take it out to those who otherwise would have no family-based opportunity to come in contact with the process of devotional service and make it available to them. And that is what Srila Prabhupada did. He came to New York, which was full of these types of personalities being described here, the lowest of the lowest. And he gave the opportunity for them to practice devotional service, gave us all where we would be had Srila Prabhupada not crossed that ocean. Even many of us coming from India, having the benefits that are even explained by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from Bharatvarsha, still we're lost until Srila Prabhupada brought this highest knowledge to us. And that proves its ability to uplift. This is not just in historical context. It's happening right in front of us, all around. The tangible effects of chanting the holy names of the Lord are seen everywhere, all over the world today. You can see people taking to the process of devotional service, coming from all walks of life, all skin colors, all heights, all facial features, everything. People are taking to the process of devotional service, proving its potency. So yes, bhakti won't change our current prarabdha karma, our body. It's not going to make us beautiful. Put your hand in the bead bag and all of a sudden, we'll have more likes on Facebook when we post our picture. Oh, that's not going to happen. But whatever circumstance we are in, our opportunity to put our hand in the bead bag and chant out the holy names of the Lord is not restricted. And Rupa Goswami, in the Nectar of Instruction, he speaks of the importance of not judging the bodily defects of the devotees. One should not even see them in making any evaluation of one's purity and bhakti. Srila Prabhupada, and in the verse, they give the example of the Ganges when it is, muddy and foamy after the rainy season. It looks impure, but the devotee knows that the Ganga is always pure and do not hesitate to take bath within it. So like that, the bodily circumstance should not be judged. What is important is the internal consciousness. So the purificatory process, how one purifies from the position, is the process of devotional service. And we can speak a little bit about that in concluding today's discussion. Around the purifying process, we see Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was saying, what is going to cleanse the heart? It is a chanting of the holy names. And in the Narada Pancharatra, we see this verse, Sarva Padi Vinrimittam Tatparetpana Nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchate. When one engages the senses in devotional service, one's senses become purified and one becomes free of these material designations. So we can see the scientific effect of bhakti, if you will. It purifies the senses, which if we are born in an impure state, we are in need of, so that we can take to the process of devotional service. So it is by the practice of bhakti that this happens. So in the Nectar Devotion, Rupa Goswami gives us, the 5 supercharged processes of bhakti to accelerate our purification. The 5 most potent aspects of devotional service are given. And everyone knows all of them, but it's always enjoyable to repeat them. That these 5 most potent angas of devotional service, any of them individually are capable of very quickly bringing one to Krishna Prema. So no matter how fallen or how low our starting point may be, even born in this Neshada race, by following these potent aspects of devotional service, one can very quickly make progress. And what are those processes? Chanting of the holy names. Good, attentive, high-quality chanting. It's so powerful. It can immediately bring one up. And we see it all around us. The tangible effects of the power of chanting are how many people have uplifted their situation by chanting the holy names of the Lord. By reciting and reading Srimad Bhagavatam, as we have the opportunity to do every morning. This Srimad Bhagavatam is full of instructions, full of valuable lessons. But again, it is not about just acquiring the knowledge. It is about transforming the consciousness. How are these pastimes changing the way I approach my day-to-day life. That defines the ultimate value we obtain from studying Srimad Bhagavatam. Worshipping the deities. Krishna has descended into the Archa Vigraha form for the benefit of increasing our attraction to him and helping us detach from the material world. Srila Prabhupada explains, by worshipping the deity, one is able to detach from all the material allurements. Serving and associating with devotees. This sadhu sangha, so important in our devotional life. And finding ways to render service to the devotees is our utmost fortune. Krishna says, one who serves my devotee is more pleasing to me than one who serves me directly. And we see that in our acharyas. They render so much service to the devotees. Living in the holy dham is the fifth. Wherever Krishna is the center of all activities, is considered to be the holy dham. Srila Prabhupada brought Vrindavan with him everywhere he went, being a pure devotee, and he established these temples. These temples are considered non-different than the holy dham, because Krishna is the center of focus and activity, just as in Vrindavan and Vrajalila. So these 5 things: chanting, Srimad, reading, reciting and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, worshipping the deities, serving and associating the Lord, living in the holy dham. These are the 5 very potent practices of bhakti that can accelerate our purification. And you can see Srila Prabhupada, everything he did was very methodical and well thought out. The morning program contains these 5 aspects of devotional service. All 5 of the most potent angas of sadhana bhakti are contained within our morning program. We worship the deity with Mangal Arti. We serve the devotee, worshiping Tulsi Maharani. We chant the holy names of the Lord. We have Srimad Bhagavatam Class, and we gather in the holy dham under the shelter of the deities in the temple. So like this, he establishes with great precision. And one thing I read recently that was very inspiring, I'll just share. We every morning we sing this Guru Vastaka prayer. And they're very beautiful and extremely powerful prayers, glorifying the spiritual master. But sometimes we may wonder, why this prayer? Why in Mangal Arti? Well, Srila Prabhupada established this for, again, a very specific reason. And Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, who wrote this prayer, he says, one who with great care and attention loudly recites this beautiful prayer to the spiritual master during the Brahma Muhurta obtains direct service to Krishna, the Lord of Vrindavan, at the time of death. Wow. Just chanting this Guru Vastaka prayer during the Brahma Muhurta achieves the direct service of Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. So, if we are not able to attend Mangal Arti every day, at least we can recite these Guru Vastaka prayers in the morning. Upon rising, chant these prayers, and then sit down for our chanting. We can see the great potency of that. And like that, there are many other processes to accelerate our purification. But the point is, bhakti is so powerful, so potent, that we can make great success. And that is the conclusion that Srila Prabhupada leaves us with in this chapter about the story of King Vena, which otherwise is kind of a, why, how could this happen in the lineage of Dhruva Maharaj and whatnot, and the atrocities that were performed. But we can be encouraged by this practice of devotional service. And we have so much proof all around us. And we have proof historical. Prahlad Maharaj, he purified and converted all the children of the school into Vaishnavas, which ultimately led to the extreme anger of Hiranyakashipu. Haridas Thakur, by his chanting, converted the prostitute into first-class Vaishnavi. Mugrari the hunter, transformed from the lowest of lowest. And of course, all around us, we see the effect of Srila Prabhupada, uplifting, at least myself, but through his books, and through the devotees he's left for us to learn from the lowest of lowest conditions, having some hope someday, if we take to the process of achieving perfection of life. So with that, I'll conclude. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda. So any discussion or comments, clarifications, corrections you have?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dhanvar Pranam, all glory to Srila Prabhupada Guru Maharaj. A very, very nice, instructive lecture, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for that. And the part that the take-home lesson, which I understood from this was the fact that the knowledge, unless it is connected to Krishna, may not be of much use. We have to develop grammatical qualities. Then that has to be in connection with Krishna. And also the potency of the bhakti and how you related it with the Bhagavad Gita in an lecture of instruction, lecture of technician. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. For the very, very nice class. It was really nice to when you connected it to all the previous verses. It's easy to understand. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for your very beautiful explanations. And as Malika Mataji said, as always, connecting it back to Bhagavad Krishna. Thank you for the beautiful class.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for your wonderful class. Anybody having any questions or comments for Prabhuji?
Thank you, Prabhuji. Very wonderful class. Thank you. Nice instructions also reminders. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Dandava Pranam.
So if there are no more questions or comments, I think we can end the call here. Let's pay our obeisances to all the Vaishnavas and Prabhuji and Chakalpita Vyasya Vipasiki Devacha Patitanam Bhavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Hashya Thakur Ki Jai Swami Srila Bhagavatam Ki Jai
Muted. This session is no longer being recorded.
Jai